What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at a video by CNBC that talks about the competition between Disney and Universal Studios with the amount of money that they are putting into these parks currently and what the forecast could be for both of them. Now, I also find this video rather interesting because, well, first off, it's a video and not an article. I think a lot of these mainstream outlets are starting to get more towards the video and YouTube side of things. But also, CNBC is owned by Comcast. So I am very curious. I haven't watched this video yet as to if they have any bias in this video. Be kind of interesting here. But we're going to watch through this and get some thoughts on it here. So the video is called The Multi-Billion-Dollar Theme Park Race Between Disney and Universal. So let's take a look at this.
We're going to invest roughly $30 billion in the United States to expand Orlando and California.
This park is the most technologically advanced thing we've ever done, and we've done some pretty advanced things in our...
It may just be me, but anytime I see Bob Iger talk, I immediately just think he's lying about something, or I don't know. He doesn't give me a soothing feel about anything he talks about. Whereas Mark Woodbury, I thoroughly enjoy hearing from him, but you're also talking about the CEO of Disney, which has multiple different tentacles everywhere, and Mark Woodbury is singularly focused on the Universal parks. But with that said, when it comes to listening to CEOs talk, which I don't like to do very often, I actually enjoy listening to Mark Woodbury. Maybe that's just me.
Our time.
Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando Resort, two of the biggest names in theme parks, are about to get even bigger.
We've got a lion's share of that investment coming to us.
At Walt Disney World, plans are already in the works, with expansions and facelifts being rolled out across several of its parks, including the largest addition to Magic Kingdom in the park's history.
This always bugs me. They're saying expansions to Disney World. Villains Land, yes, that's an expansion. But what they're doing in Magic Kingdom, what they're doing in Animal Kingdom, what they're doing in Hollywood Studios, they're not expansions in terms of the landmass. You can argue that the attractions they're going to put in there are going to expand the capacity of those rides and people being interested in them, but it's not an expansion per se. Outside of Villains Land, yes, that one's an expansion. The other ones, not so much.
This is a massive site, and we want to stay relevant, stay current, invest in our existing assets, and make new experiences as well.
Nothing like staying relevant by putting Cars into your theme parks that its first movie came out in 2006. To be fair, as I've talked about, I'm not a fan of the rivers going away. I am intrigued by the Piston Peak concept of a national park land, but I have said consistently, I don't understand why Cars is going in here, and I would also argue it's not the most relevant IP. If you want to be IP heavy, putting those things into your parks, fair enough. I just have questions about how much of a draw Cars is going to be, especially whenever it's not like it's Lightning McQueen. You're talking about an alternate universe version of Cars from everything that they've told us. Maybe Lightning McQueen's in here, but I highly doubt it, given if they're going to try and fit this into the Frontierland time period. I don't know if I'd say that's the most relevant thing, but I digress.
Across town is Universal Orlando, the home of another iconic castle.
Now it's opening Epic Universe, a fourth theme park that's expected to double the size of Universal's footprint in Orlando.
It's so different than anything else that we've ever built, but certainly I think it's different than anyone's ever built.
A theme park Universal hopes will rival Disney World, making it a full-week destination in itself.
I think you might be passing Disney at this point, Mark.
But as these two theme park giants invest billions into their Central Florida properties, a dark cloud is hanging over Orlando.
Now, looming over the whole industry is concern about a potential decline in consumer spending.
Economic and political volatility has pulled on consumer sentiment, forcing travelers to forego U.S. vacations. In 2025, the United States is expected to lose $12.5 billion in international travel spending, a 22% decline from its peak in 2019. That trend could cost the U.S. $21 billion in revenue if it continues.
Can Walt Disney World or Universal Orlando escape a broader, prolonged period of consumer weakness that results from tariffs? No way.
So will Universal...
I think when you're talking about all this stuff with theme parks, I think theme parks are a bit different in that you have the macro and you have the micro. Obviously, the micro being right now or the next year, and then you have the macro being long term, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And I've said all along, the success of Epic Universe and what Universal is doing, I don't think their timetable is necessarily just right in this very moment. I think a lot of things they're doing are setting up for future things. Obviously, Epic Universe is going to be around for decades, but I think Disney they're a different company. They're much more focused on quarter by quarter, given that those theme parks are the majority of the revenue that makes the money for Disney. So their focuses and like what they may react to, I do think are a bit different. Now, obviously, Universal wants to make money as quickly as they can. They want Epic Universe to be a massive success. But in that scenario, I don't think Universal is necessarily uber focused on just the here and now, as they're doing a lot of things to build more into the future. So it just depends. Like if there is this downturn and people are obviously, if they're holding onto their money more, that's obviously going to affect the theme parks, both Disney and Universal. What's interesting would just be how would they look at that and navigate it. Whereas I look at Universal and I feel like they're just going on a plan they have. And I think Disney is much more reactive in many ways in terms of if their attendance does take a hit, it obviously is going to affect their stock price a lot more than say it would with Comcast. So just how the companies are set up is interesting, and how they react to market dynamics in the here and now versus the long-term trends. I always have found that interesting, and just given the Universal, the way they operate, the things they do in their parks don't reflect as much on on Comcast's stock price, and they're kind of allowed to operate in their own little bubble in many ways. Now, that could change in the future, but as of right now, that's kind of how they kind of operate, which I find very interesting when looking at both of them.
Universal and Disney's billion-dollar bets on theme parks pay off, or will a tourism downturn sour Orlando's epic summer?
You step in and you get to see all your favorite characters and all the surrounding environment and all the animated, substantive entertainment elements in it.
This spring, Universal Orlando opened the gates to Epic Universe, costing an estimated $7 billion. Epic Universe is Comcast.
That's almost confirmation. The rumors have been out there $6 to $8 billion, but given this is CNBC, which is owned by Comcast, and they're saying $7, I feel like that is ultimately what the price is, given that they would know. So I'm just going to go on and say $7 billion is how much Epic Universe cost.
Biggest theme park investment to date. It also marks the first theme park opening in the US in more than 2 decades. Comcast is the parent company of CNBC.
When you walk in and you step through Peach's Castle and you're standing in Super Nintendo World, you feel like you've been dropped into the game.
Universal's flagship resort welcomes around 20 million visitors annually, a number it's hoping to boost during Epic's inaugural summer. Epic Universe includes 5 brand new themed worlds that combine a wide variety of new and existing IP for the park.
I feel like this might be a subtle, maybe not so subtle, like kind of, what do they call those things? Info articles, like info videos. It's kind of a commercial inside of another video. Because again, CNBC is owned by Comcast. Maybe. We'll see how this plays out in the rest of the video.
To Train Your Dragon's Isle of Berk, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter's Ministry of Magic, Celestial Park, Super Nintendo World, and a throwback to classic monster movies with Dark Universe.
One of the most amazing attractions I'd say that we've ever built is in that world. It's called Monsters Unchained.
While only 7% of Comcast's overall revenue, theme parks brought in $8.6 billion in 2024. And in addition, Comcast overall...
I think this chart's very interesting when you look at how Comcast is set up versus Disney. Theme parks make up 7% of the entire revenue for Comcast. You have a much bigger slice, which is the residential connectivity and platforms, which that's going to be internet, things like that for residential. Then you've got the business side, media. Like, theme parks are a very small slice of the pie when it comes to Universal, but they are spending a lot of money in the theme parks, obviously. You don't spend $7 billion on a new theme park if you're not anticipating or planning on that really paying off. So I think that is a much bigger percentage than it used to be for Comcast, but they're obviously putting a lot of money in this, anticipating this becoming a bigger part of the pie. And you think about Comcast as well, you know, the linear TV markets, even some of the internet stuff and cable and things have been shrinking. So I think they're looking at theme parks as a growth driver, especially in the next decade. But if you had this same chart with Disney, the majority of it is going to be from the theme parks, and then the movies and TV and streaming side is going to be a smaller pie than compared to how it is for Comcast. So I think it's pretty interesting when you talk about Disney and Universal competing, which they are, but the companies themselves, the way they're set up, are very differently in terms of how they handle the parks and kind of what the expectations are from those. A lot more pressure and expectations obviously on Disney, given the amount of money that comes in and how much money it makes for the company, whereas Universal, they obviously, I'm sure there's pressure on them to make money, but not as much when you look at this pie here. It's just, I always have found this very interesting when looking at how both of these companies compete, but they're set up very differently from each other.
Overall revenue, theme parks brought in $8.6 billion in 2024 and an additional $1.8 billion in Q1 2025. That makes Epic's addition a clear growth opportunity for the segment.
A reasonable estimate of revenue for Epic is about $2 billion on an annualized basis, with about a 30 to 35% profit margin.
Both Disney and Universal's parent company Comcast saw their share prices peak in 2021 as the post-COVID tourism wave saw pent-up travel demand spilling into theme parks. For both companies, the theme park segments are consistent performers.
So just taking a look at the charts they have here, this is Disney domestic parks. This is just domestic, which sometimes it's hard to, sometimes they group these things all together. But, Disney is well above, $5 billion and above, typically, when you're looking at this pass since 2023. And then you compare that to Universal.
Offsetting volatility in areas like film and linear TV.
Comcast, Universal Parks hovering around a little bit below $2 billion. So you can see there where you talk about Universal competing with Disney. Disney is still clearly the leader in the theme parks. Magic Kingdom is the number one theme park attendance-wise in the world. But obviously Universal is in market share mode. They're trying to eat into market share and up that obvious, revenue. What'd be really interesting is you could see not as much. I don't think this year. It'd be really interesting to see what it looks like quarter by quarter after Epic's been open, given obviously people are coming in there. They're still working through issues at that park. But I really think the full effect of Epic will be in 1 to 2 years of really seeing once the park is established, once it's, everything's more reliable. How do general audiences coming in view it, and how much does it help with their, bottom line? If that guy's saying that Epic could bring in, I think he said $2 to $3 billion, maybe $2 billion, obviously that would bump this up, if that's accurate, to closer, if they're at $1.8 billion, that would get it much closer to that $5 billion that is sort of Disney's bottom line. I'm not saying it will get there. I'm just saying that's kind of interesting. You add that piece of the pie in there. How does this change for Universal in the coming years in terms of the overall revenue?
Industry insiders are telling me that the media giant's parks divisions are more important than ever. A larger part of Comcast once it spins off Versant, which includes CNBC, and almost 60% of Disney's operating income comes from its parks division at a time of transition and uncertainty for its linear and film divisions.
For Universal, though, it still has a long way to go to catch up with Disney World's roughly 50 million annual park goers. But for its part, Universal's
division at a time of transition and uncertainty.
So what they're referring to here is Comcast had announced that they're spinning off some of their cable properties. So USA Network, CNBC, MSNBC, Oxygen, E, Sci-Fi, and Golf Channel into a separate company. And then by doing that, and then the thinking there is there would be much more expectations from the theme parks of Comcast because they're spinning off some of these things that they look at as, diminishing returns, linear assets in that way. So just because it's how it's been for Universal in terms of the theme parks haven't had a lot of pressure on them, a lot of expectations necessarily, I do think that changes a lot going into the future as they look to make a lot more money from the theme parks. And I think that's part of what they're alluding to here.
For its linear and film divisions.
For Universal, though, it still has a long way to go to catch up with Disney World's roughly 50 million annual park goers. But for its part, Universal is looking to go after another segment of tourists, thrill seekers.
The Disney product is more geared towards families and nostalgia, and the Universal park is more geared towards teenagers, young adults, and contemporary culture.
Beyond the addition of Epic, Universal is also building out its hotel footprint in and around Orlando to 11,000 rooms.
We now have 11 hotels, and they're all very different, all really designed to cater not just thematically, but to different people's budgets.
Comparatively, Disney World Resorts' portfolio is more than double that, with 29,000 rooms and more than 25 hotel options. Still, Universal is hoping the addition of Epic will take Universal Orlando from a 2 to 3 day destination to a full week experience.
You will not be able to enjoy everything that it is we have to offer without being here for 4 or 5 days. You really need it all.
And while all eyes might be on Epic Universe this summer, Walt Disney World has some epic, or should I say magical, plans of its own.
I'm standing on Main Street, USA, in Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. Every single day, tens of thousands of visitors come down this street.
That sounds like a nightmare to film a segment on Main Street, which looks like it's around closing time. I would imagine that is a very distracting way to film a segment, but it's kind of funny.
Towards that castle, culminating in 17 million visitors.
That old guy, he's just like stuck in the frame. I think he's trying to get out of it.
Welcome, dancers, welcome.
Riding rides, taking pictures, eating pretzels, buying Mickey ears, and staying at Disney resorts.
We talk about the Disney bubble. Without that, we wouldn't be able to have that value proposition.
Okay, here's the thing. They've been doing this lately where they keep reiterating the Disney bubble. I don't recall Disney ever really mentioning the Disney bubble. It was more of a thing I feel like the fans used. But Disney has come out and talked about the importance of the Disney bubble and all these things, which I find funny because the main thing, in my opinion, that was the main driver to reinforcing the Disney bubble were things like the Magical Express. Picked you up at the airport, took you to Disney, they took care of all the transportation and take you back to the airport. Like, it was a great asset to reinforce the Disney bubble, in which they got rid of. Now, to be fair, they got rid of it under Chapek, so who knows if that would have been something Iger would have done, but obviously it was a cost-cutting maneuver. But now they're kind of going back to reinforcing the Disney bubble, which has led me to think there is a good chance that they bring back the Magical Express at some point, because if they're going to tout the Disney bubble, that was the best asset they had in reinforcing it. I don't know if they'll talk about it on here, but it is funny. You've heard them a lot more of the higher up in execs talking about the Disney bubble more than I recall them ever talking about it.
Now, with $30 billion being infused into its U.S. parks, Disney World has already rolled out plans for some major expansions and additions.
One of the places you'll see these changes is right behind me. Rivers of America and the Space Beyond is going to be home to one of Magic Kingdom's largest expansions to date.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Again, it's not really an expansion. They're replacing the rivers, putting something else in there, unless they're going to talk about villains being an actual expansion. But this just kind of bugs me. It's not an expansion. It's a replacement. Let's just call it what it is. Whether you're for it or against it, it's not an expansion of the area. It's a replacement of other parts into something different.
A brand new Cars-themed area and Villains Land.
Okay, well, if you're talking about Villains Land in there, then yes, that part is an expansion.
We're taking villains that we know and love from their stories, but we have this chance to create a new place for them, a new environment that has not necessarily been seen.
Disney's Hollywood Studios will also be welcoming a new expansion with Monstropolis. Other projects are already in the works. Hidden behind this green wall is the future site of Tropical Americas, a new addition to Disney's Animal Kingdom, opening in 2027.
We're leaning heavily into the Maya culture.
To put in perspective how big that $30 billion investment is, in 2018, Disney opened Pandora, the world of Avatar and Animal Kingdom, an immersive world that cost an estimated $500 million to build, featuring what was, at its opening, the most advanced animatronic in Disney Parks history.
I actually thought Pandora would have cost more than $500 million. I mean, I still contend Pandora is the best newer land that Disney's done. And I think for very good reason, because it had James Cameron and Joe Rohde in charge of it. I think that's a main reason as to why. But I would really have assumed, with given that land and Flight of Passage in there, that $500 million seems low. But maybe it's inflation, or maybe, I don't know. I really would have figured that land would be much more expensive.
Over in Disney's Hollywood Studios is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Opened in 2019, the entire 14-acre expansion cost Disney a reported $1 billion.
Okay, they said Disneyland's $1 billion Star Wars. Are they talking about $1 billion in each land or combined? It's kind of confusing how they're wording that. I will just say, big swing and a miss. Not a fan of Galaxy's Edge. In terms of what you could have done with the Star Wars land, people may disagree, but I think Pandora is a much better land than Galaxy's Edge.
You have incredibly advanced figures like the Shaman on Navi River, or you've got something more nimble like BDX droids that can circle the globe very quickly. And rest assured that as we think about the investments that we're making in Tropical Americas and Cars and Villains in the future, all of that and more is being incorporated into the thinking of what we'll be able to bring to life for our guests.
In 2024, Disney's theme park segment raked in a record revenue of more than $34 billion, a 5% climb from the year prior.
Disney really is a theme park company that also makes films and television. So it's about 2/3 of the company's operating profits are coming from experiences.
On top of its announced third.
I think in terms of what he's talking about there, Braden from Mickey Views, I think, puts it best about what really Disney's like unique selling position is. And I don't think it's, I mean, obviously when you talk about business speak, that guy's not wrong necessarily, but he says Disney isn't in the business of selling theme park tickets or rooms. Disney's in the business of selling memories. Replacing attractions can enhance that product with new memories, but it comes at a cost. The replacements must be memorable. Anything less erodes the product. I think that is the closest thing in terms of a business perspective, that what made Disney so different from anywhere else you could vacation historically was they would call it, the magic of Disney. Going to Disney had a certain feeling to it, whether it was cast members or doing a little extra magic in your trip or something along those lines. But I think Disney, would be much better to have that mindset. Like if that was sort of their business mantra, everything they run that filter through. Businesses do that, and I think it's an important thing to do is like, what is your mission statement as a business? And you run every decision through that mission statement. And if a decision or you're looking to make a decision doesn't fit that, then you reevaluate it, or maybe you don't do it. And I think if they looked at it as we're selling memories, we're selling family memories you're going to remember forever, I think a lot of the things they do, I think that would be a better way to maybe put a filter in place of things you do in the parks and not just be so focused on profits. Now, obviously, corporations, especially ones that are publicly traded, that's kind of all they care about is profits. Quarter by quarter, increasing revenue, which we've seen that in the Disney parks. But I think that also has come at a cost because people obviously, and I think rightfully so, I agree with this, that the value of your vacation over the years has diminished while the price has gone up. And you're in that situation while you're removing a lot of areas from your parks that have been there, many of them since the opening day, have historical ties to Walt and things of that nature. I just think they've gotten away from what they've always done. And it seems to me, in my opinion, Disney has over the years, they've always been corporate, but it's become much more corporate in even the way that it comes across to the fan base and the guests. And I don't think it used to be that way completely. I think that's one of the smaller ways I would say that the vibe or feel around Disney has shifted over the years, especially since 2019. But just in general, you can say the last 10, 15 years, they've had that shift.
$30 billion investment. Last year, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District approved a historic deal with Walt Disney World. Remember Disney's political back and forth with Governor Ron DeSantis? Well, it quietly came to a close last year. Afterwards, Disney and the board came to a new agreement where Disney would invest up to $17 billion over the next 10 to 20 years. For its part, Disney got approval for several expansions, if it wishes to do so. In the agreement, Disney World got a green light to grow its maximum hotel capacity from around 40,000 to more than 53,000 rooms, a serious expansion from its current hotel capacity of 29,000.
I wonder if that includes DVC. It probably does. Because we haven't seen Disney do a real new hotel that wasn't DVC. I think Art of Animation was the last one. So I am curious. I have felt all along they could use a new value resort that's not one of the All-Stars or, Pop Century and those, like some sort of more modern value resort. Kind of like, in my opinion, I like Universal's value resorts better because they're not motel style. They have, closed off hallways and things. Maybe they do that. I don't know. Or that could all just be DVC because they're obviously building a lot of DVC hotels.
Still, Disney World has yet to announce any such plans.
If you think about a hotel company with 29,000 rooms now that we've grown to, and we really, after 54 years, continue to raise the bar.
The tariff uncertainty could put pressure on Disney World's construction plans.
Most of the rides, the big heavy-duty equipment in the theme parks, are manufactured outside of the United States and shipped here. There's certainly a chance for impact from tariffs that's measured in the billions. A lot of the construction cost of a theme park is labor, and that would be only indirectly exposed to tariffs.
It possibly would raise the construction cost, the amount of investment needed. Probably the burden will come back to the consumer.
Meaning your theme park vacation could end up costing you, the consumer, more in the coming years. Vacations that are already pretty pricey.
The price hikes at parks was enormous over the last few years. Same for some of the food, just every time they could, they would either make packages smaller, higher price, whatever. If that consumer is just pushing back on that.
The great thing about a great business is you can increase your prices because there just aren't sufficient substitutes for what you sell. And that's certainly true of Disney World. And so while Disney World revenue is above its 2019 pre-pandemic high watermark. Disney World attendance isn't.
But the real villain or monster?
I think that is true, what they're saying. And historically with Disney, they could raise prices and, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to go to Six Flags or somewhere else? You can, and some people would, but for many people, they'll still go. I think this is where competition is a great thing because Disney raising the prices as they have and the changes they have made in the theme parks have really opened the door for what Universal's growth has been the past decade. And if you look at the past decade, they've eaten into market share about 10%. And it also just coincides. It's not like Universal is just sitting around not doing anything and just sort of benefiting from people being priced out of Disney. They're at the same time have been investing majorly into the Universal Studios parks, obviously with Epic Universe being the culmination of that. But the Wizarding Worlds and everything else they're doing in the parks, more competition is going to force Disney on some level where they're not just going to be able to just raise prices willy-nilly as they want without more, ramifications for that. I think 10, 20 years ago, sure, there wasn't really any other competition for Disney. They could raise the prices because they have a unique product, nothing else like it. And some people still feel that way about Disney, but I think the gap between Disney and Universal in terms of the immersion and things that they do is getting smaller. And obviously Universal is not the same size as Disney. It may never get to that point. But this is why I like competition for this reason right here of raising prices. And then people, either pay that or they say, well, hey, you can go over here and get a very similar or even sometimes maybe better experience over here. Let's go over here. And I think the consumer benefits from that in a situation where there's actually competition and not just one company that just owns the entire market like that. And, this is one reason why I think a lot of people, I really like what Universal's been doing and the stuff that they have going on. But at the same time, it provides, if you are a Disney person that doesn't care about Universal, you're still benefiting from that with the competition from Universal, not only in the pricing perhaps. I mean, Disney still is going to raise prices, but the theme park offerings that you're getting, a lot of this is fueled by Universal and what they're doing as well.
In the story could be something that's out of Disney and Universal's control. Tariffs, economic uncertainty, recession fears, inflation, political volatility. Most of us go on vacation to avoid thinking about headlines like these. Unfortunately, they may now be crashing their way into your vacation.
In really harsh downturns like the financial crisis of 2008, and then of course COVID, Orlando has been terribly cyclical. Revenue in Orlando declined by a double-digit percentage, peak to trough during the financial crisis and much more during COVID.
Early bellwethers for the travel industry, U.S. airlines and hotel chains are raising alarms around softening consumer demand. As of April 2025, U.S. airline ticket sales are down almost 4% compared to last year.
At the end of the day, travel is consumer discretionary spend, and when people see capital market volatility, trade uncertainty, they tend to pull back in discretionary areas like travel, and we do think that's happening right now.
Hotel chains Marriott, Hyatt, and Hilton have all lowered their revenue outlook. Expedia and Airbnb both cited softening demand in recent quarters. This says consumer confidence took a hit in early 2025 on fears of tariff-driven inflation.
If you're uncertain how the economy is going to develop, then you're going to try to be more cautious in your spending. So that is something that is being seen as well.
A recent Bank of America report found travel demand in the first half of the year fell sharply in several states. Hospitality-dependent cities like Las Vegas are already showing cracks, with multiple casino layoffs being attributed to a downturn in international tourists, a demographic that spends on average 8 times more than domestic travelers. International tourists make up 8 to 9% of Orlando's annual visitors.
6.4 million international visitors that come to our area. They stay longer and they spend more money.
It could have an effect, a negative effect on our local GDP.
But if we revisit that Bank of America chart, we see Florida actually saw an increase in tourism in early 2025.
The opening of Epic this year, together with what is going on, it's a countering effect on the overall.
Many of the people, both internationally and domestic, had already planned their vacations for this summer.
Not only is Epic's opening helping bring money into Orlando, but it could be the thing that helps the city survive a broader consumer pullback. Hotel and vacation home bookings climbed as much as 14% in the Orlando area around the time of Epic's opening.
So far, in 2025, the numbers are extraordinary. We believe that those numbers will continue.
I know people who are like, whatever happens, they still need and want to go to the theme parks.
you know, looking at that, that makes sense with Disney's rhetoric, which has kind of gone back and forth since last year, but them ultimately saying that, you know, they're not worried about the impact from Epic. They anticipate it helping them. I think a lot of it is looking at that, those charts there, and that overall like travel going up in Florida, and they even showed California there, which has to be encouraging for both Disney and Universal. If you're seeing these numbers about fears in the economy, but you're still seeing an uptick, that means once there's no longer fears in the economy, things have a rebound, you would anticipate even bigger numbers coming in, which is why, you know, you can't time out when you're building a theme park that it's going to open in the best of environments. You don't have any control over that, which is why I've said, yes, I do think Epic Universe is going to have an impact. I think clearly that is showing that. But at the same time, you're not building Epic for the summer of 2025. You're not, in Disney's not adding the things they're adding to the parks looking for just one boom in a summer. You're adding these things in for them to be around for a long time, to benefit from them for the long term. And I think this is, theme parks are kind of interesting in that they are sort of product-driven markets, but they have a lot of costs that go into them, but you can reap the rewards of those costs for years. I mean, probably look at the initial things Disney built that are still popular to this day. The ROI on those things will be immensely high. And I think that's the same thing that Disney and Universal are looking at. And I would assume be encouraged by seeing a chart like that, that is showing even with everything else going on, they're still seeing an increase in the area.
When it comes to this multi-billion-dollar battle between these two theme park giants, analysts believe Epic Universe's opening isn't just a tailwind for Universal, but also a big driver for visitors into Disney World.
Disney's Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro is bullish, saying, quote, if something is built new in Central Florida like Epic Universe, that new tourist coming into the market is going to have to visit the Magic Kingdom.
The numbers speak for themselves because Epic is having an amazing opening as far as ticket sales and driving that demand. You look at Disney and SeaWorld, and they're seeing incredible numbers already in this year.
Disney said that their forward bookings for the prime months of the theme park season are up mid-single-digit % against last year.
So will these historic theme park...
I still have questions about that, given the... Now, that very well, all that stuff being true. But talking historically, there's really nothing to reference historically, because yes, you can look at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and the impact it had for Universal and how that also translated to Disney. But I felt all along with Universal having Epic in there, it is changing potentially Universal from being a 2-day destination to a 3 to 4 day. I mean, potentially, if you want to spend a week at Universal, you can. I don't know. It would depend on if you look at Epic as a 2-day park, potentially, then you go to the other parks, if you're going to go to the water parks. But turning it into a longer destination, it doesn't mean that people won't go to Disney, but it could mean that people don't go to Disney as long as they have before. If people typically have gone to Disney for 4 to 5 nights, and now they're splitting time between Disney and Universal, and they're saying going 3 to 4 nights, or let's say 3 nights at Universal, 2 nights at Disney, your bookings are still going to be there. You're going to see people coming in, but they're not going as long, which could end up, hitting Disney on the revenue side. Now, obviously, that's yet to be determined, but I feel like that's a very plausible scenario in that people will still want to go check out probably Magic Kingdom and some of the bigger parks. But I think, Animal Kingdom, some of these other ones could get hit pretty hard in their attendance due to Epic and the things Universal's doing. So that part of it, which they probably won't go into, is something I have a question about, which is kind of around that, and not just the broad terms of are people still going to both, but how long are people going to both, and what have they done historically, which could be a shift in sort of how people are, visiting the parks versus how they did maybe 10 years ago.
Investments pay off? Well, when it comes to Disney's $30 billion in expansions.
In the long run, it almost certainly will. We have objective financial evidence that historically very large, tens of billions of dollars scale investments have paid off.
For Epic, however, Universal's newest...
I will say about Disney's investments, I mean, chances are more than likely it's going to pay off. But I will say with Epic being in the realm of things now, the things that Disney is removing and replacing them with new things, there's a lot of pressure on Disney to deliver on these things, and they cannot cheap out. They have to hit home runs on these things. Not only for the Disney fan base, if you're going to take out the rivers and replace it with this new Cars, National Forest or National Parks idea, the thing, replacing Muppet Vision 3D with monsters like Animal Kingdom. I don't think there's as much people are really tied to those. I know there's some fanfare with those, but not as much. They haven't been around as long. But you have to deliver on these things. You can't cheap out. You can't have budget cuts. You have to have these, brand new high-tech rides that are really going to wow people, because everyone is going to compare everything that you're doing now to what's at Epic Universe. And you have some amazing attractions, a brand new theme park, and really the stuff Universal has been doing. I mean, these themed lands, these majorly themed IP lands after one IP is something Universal started that Disney has been doing as well. So in terms of the investment paying off, if they deliver, and they deliver on high quality, they don't cheap out on this stuff, and they go above and beyond, then yeah, more than likely these things will pay off. But if you replace these areas and they're just not that good to replace them, they have a lot of issues with them, I think for the audience, a lot of people could sour on this, just looking at the overall trends. But look at the Epcot overhaul. Like there's examples of things not turning out the best in recent history with Disney. Now, there are some that have turned out well. Cosmic Rewind, it's not a redo, but it's a new attraction that's gone in there. Rise of the Resistance, I think, is a great attraction in a subpar land. But there's a lot of, it's not just a given that these things are just automatically going to pay off for Disney in this current environment. Again, this is much different than it was 10 years ago, and there's a lot more pressure on what Disney's doing now than I think there ever has been, and that will be the interesting part to see how that plays out.
Edition might take a little more time to turn a profit.
Comcast will require years of growth and price increases to drive Epic towards a really robust financial return that meets the level of the more seasoned portfolios at Universal and Disney.
We build these parks and these assets for a very long future, and we're not in it for a short term.
That, I think, is the mindset exactly of Universal. I don't, and like I said earlier in the video, I don't think they're as focused on the short term as Disney is, just given the way the companies are set up. But I don't think Epic or any of these things are being built for just this year or next year. They're being built for long-term assets to continue to build into what they've been doing. I mean, overall, for a video that is owned by a company that owns Universal Studios, like, there's going to be some biases in there, but it was pretty fair. I mean, they are admitting that, the difference is there. Disney's much bigger. It wasn't as biased as I think it could have been. Probably a little bit here and there. Obviously, they're being able to talk to, well, actually, they talked to both Disney and Universal executives. So, pretty fair, I think, in terms of the video and the outlet is coming from. And really nothing groundbreaking. I think if, people watching this channel, other channels that are into these things, a lot of these things are not unknown things they're talking about. But this video alone would not have existed 10 years ago. And I think that shows you exactly how far Universal has come in terms of eating up market share from Disney and doing, opening Epic Universe and the things that they're doing. And I think they're going to continue to do, being very aggressive in what they're doing in the theme parks. This wouldn't have even been a conversation 10 years ago. I mean, where Disney was, where Universal was, it was just not a big deal. Now that, obviously that gap has narrowed, Disney is reacting to a lot of Universal stuff that they've been doing. You have much more of a competition here. And I think as time goes on, it's going to continue to be that way. I think when you look at both of them, in the past decade, Universal has eaten into market share almost by 10% when it comes to Disney. So currently, as it stands, or where it was, in 2010, Disney had an 80% market share, Universal had 20%. In 2023, Disney had 71% and Universal had 29%. So that's a very significant difference in a decade, considering where Universal was coming from and where they're at now, and really where they can continue to go. And then if you just take that and let's say that same area broke down the next 10 years, which more than likely is not going to be on that same trajectory. It could be much higher or it could be lower. Obviously, different things can happen. But if that were to happen by 2035, you'd be looking at the same linear path here. Disney would have 60 to 63% market share and Universal at 37 to 40%. I think this is the game that Universal's playing in the long term, which is being very aggressive and just continuing to eat into that market share. And if they're able to get enough market share, obviously, then they're going to make more money. And then this whole market completely changes. Now, obviously, this is the reason Disney is investing more in their parks, because of competition. Disney would not be investing all this money into their parks just because they want to. They're in a situation where they feel like they need to answer for these things and add new things into their parks to keep them fresh and to keep the attention on them and to fortify their market share. So this is the part that's going to be really interesting the next decade, is really the back and forth with this. How do the crowds end up, receiving these things? Obviously, we're still finding out with Epic. How are the things Disney, brings online that they're building? How are those received? Obviously, that's going to be very important to see how that you know, this continuing battle goes with how the crowds come in, or do they come in for the new things that Disney has announced. And there's going to continue to be new things by Universal. They've already announced Rip Ride Rocket. There's probably other announcements coming. They could do expansions to Epic Universe. Given that I do think Universal is being much more aggressive creatively, and I think they're looking at this going in the short term here. Yeah, we're, you know, looking to make some money back, but I think they're looking more in the 10, 20-year time frame and really where they want to go. Whereas I don't think Disney, at least I don't get the idea that Disney's in that same mindset. I don't think they're sitting there painting a picture of the next 20 years of what they want from the parks. It seems much more reactive when it comes to Disney on the changes they're making. But this is the part I think is fun to look at this in the long term. Like in the short term, obviously, it's still fun to look at this stuff in the quarter by quarter. But you look at the long term of like where these things could go. That's very interesting to me because, like I said, if Universal continues to eat into this market share, it is going to change how Disney does things, as they're going to have to be much more reactive to pricing and what the consumers want. And many times over the years, I mean, I think for, you know, you could justify it that they felt like they could do whatever they wanted because they had the market share and the audience to do it. And if you're in that position, you kind of can. But as time has gone on, they're still in that position, but not as much as they used to be. And as time goes forward, if Universal continues to eat in more market share, it is going to force Disney to be a little bit more responsive and like, what did the fan base want? What are they asking for? You know, pricing, be a little more sensitive to that, considering, you know, people could decide, oh, you know, go here, we're going to go over here and do this instead if you price us out. And I think these are things that Disney has to contemplate with now that I don't think they used to. So, and I've said this for a long time, the theme park market in Orlando is forever changed. Universal and Disney, it's not going to go back to how it was in 2008, 2009. It is forever changed. Universal is only going to become more competitive. They're only going to get more confident, improve their offerings. Just look at Epic Universe. And so Disney is in this new realm now. It's just a different ballgame than it used to be. In a time period where they're bringing a new CEO in next year, like there's a lot of question marks on the Disney company. You look at the movies and streaming side, that has not been the best over the years. The theme parks being really the major shining point of the entire company, bringing in all the money. And that's also where the most competition is for them, is in the theme park side. And that's going to continue to grow. So, you know, historically, Disney has completely dominated this, and they still do to this day. But that doesn't mean going forward that this dynamic won't shift or can't shift. And I think that's something a lot of people just say it'll never happen. And I'm not predicting that Universal is ever going to overtake Disney. But to act as if eating up market share of 10% in the past decade is nothing, I don't think it's nothing. I think that's very significant. And that if you look at the Universal parks, there's still a lot of areas of their existing parks outside of Epic Universe that they could improve upon, as they have a lot of wasted space in the parks, a lot of older IPs that they could change. So they still have room in their existing parks to add new things to bring crowds in on top of Epic Universe and things they may do there. So it's a very fun competition. I think I love competition. And I think if you're a theme park fan, you're going to get potentially just more great things to check out. And it's not going to slow down. The spending's not going to slow down. They're going to put more money into all the parks because as Universal continues to do what they're doing, Disney is also going to be forced to do that as well. But either way, I mean, the theme park battles are getting more mainstream, and it can be very interesting, not only this summer, but next summer in the coming years, as these two destinations go back and forth and battle for, you know, everyone's vacation dollars and time. Then, of course, we'll have to wait and see how all this shakes out on a quarter-by-quarter basis. But we will talk about all that here as that information comes about. Either way, that is going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.